Today I'm going to Lee Circle in New Orleans. There are protesters protesting the removal of Civil War monuments and statues. You may be unfamiliar with what's going on in New Orleans, but the mayor of New Orleans, Mitch Landrieu, with a 6-to-1 vote by the city council, has enacted to remove 4 monuments / statues that are representative of the Civil War here in New Orleans. One has been removed already, and there are 3 left. Where I'm going today is the one at Lee Circle, which is a statue of the Confederate General Robert E. Lee. And there's also the Jefferson Davis one, that was the president of the Confederacy. There's one on P.T. Beauregard, who was also a general in the Confederacy in Civil War. And then there is one that was already removed, which was a Liberty monument. But people are out there protesting. It's mostly white people, from what I can gather, protesting rules, saying they shouldn't be removed. Mayor's office says that majority population in New Orleans, which is black and has been black for as long as I can find statistics on it, has always been 60% or more African American. They do very much support it being removed. There are a few that don't support it, but then just like with some white people, there are some that do support removing it, and there's lots that don't. So there's that. So I'm out here at Lee Circle. Lots of, I would say about 50 or so people protesting against the removal of the monument / statue of General Robert E. Lee. There's a good bit about police out here. The streets are all barricaded. They must have filed for a permit of some sort, which is good for them, That's how you do things. You can do a protest. There's also lots of say spectators such as me out here over there chilling in the shade, because it is hot as balls out here. It is hot as balls. I don't know how so many people out here have like combat vests on and combat gear, because it is so hot out here, and you got people who are watching, who are sitting over there in the shade across the street just chilling. It's so hot out here. This would have been a lot better if this would have been done a couple days ago when it was really cool out here after a rainstorm. There's people out here too like me videoing for either their own personal reasons or other stuff. My friend Greg, I think, is out here somewhere. I don't know, I haven't seen him yet. Also, there are cameras, like surveillance cameras that have been mounted on top of some of the buildings around here, I guess to help with any type of activity happens. They have video surveillance footage of it, security footage, I guess. Anyway, Mitch, please stop dividing us. That's what that sign says. You want to be a nice person. I want to be a nice person. I think everyone wants to be a nice person. What is he ready for? Alright, so the word is that there is a large group of opposite of the other people's protesters coming. Don't know which direction or when they're supposed to be here, but that's supposedly what's going to be happening soon. Step up like a man, what you got? Step up like a man, what you got? Talking to. Ugh. So just to go over what that guy said, as I'm walking into the Lee Circle, this guy says something like, "Oh, you walk like a man," or "You dress like a man. What do you got?" And I was like, who is this guy talking to? I kind of turned, and he goes, "Yeah, that's what I thought," or "That's what I figured." I was like, who the fuck is this guy talking to? Like, why the hell is he talking to me? I'm dressed in a black t-shirt and black pants. You're holding a Confederate flag or some type of flag. I mean, Just down the street from the Lee Circle is the World War II Museum, where Americans and British and other allies fought enemies such as the Nazis. The reason I say it is because at the end of World War II, the Allies had a denazification program where they were, I think that's the right word I'm using, anyway, they would go and remove all symbols and monuments that the Nazis had set up. The most famous one, usually a Nazi symbol, swastika, being blown up on top of a building. And after Saddam Hussein, his statue was taken down. After Gaddafi, his statues were taken down, his monuments. And yet, you know, over 100 years after some of these monuments were erected, Lee Circle and all the others, the people are fighting for them to stay up because it's history. Their main argument seems to be that it's history, and that generally wasn't fighting for just the Confederacy. He was fighting for state rights, and he was against slavery. But, I mean, Nazi generals were also tried at the Nuremberg trials for taking orders to kill people, and Nazi soldiers were tried at Nuremberg trials for, you know, war crimes. And so generally, even though he fought for state rights, he was still fighting for a government that was in favor of enslaving a massive amount of people, and that still should be something to be looked at. He made a decision, instead of trying to change things and say, no, we must abolish slavery before I'll be your general, or something like that. I don't know. Same thing with P.T. Beauregard. He supposedly was a good man, according to some people, but he still was in favor of slavery. He grew up on a plantation. And Jefferson Davis, even if Jefferson Davis wasn't a bad man, he was a president of a country, I guess you could say a state that was against the equality of people. He was in favor of governing a state that kept blacks enslaved, and that's not something to celebrate. I mean, some might say that's one bad thing about him, you know, like, but that's enough. That's, you know, in favor of slavery, in favor of keeping a people bound and forced to work, is not a good thing. People want to hold on to these old traditions, but no matter what, you know, how much you ever talk about how it wasn't all about slavery, slavery is still a main part of it. Slavery is still a very atrocious thing, and to ignore that and say, oh, it's just not just all about slavery, you know, that was just one part. You're minimizing the effect of killing and enslaving people, you know, and treating people like they're less than you. So I had to cut that short because my Uber had shown up. But I was trying to get to a point that people have no problem supporting a government, the Confederate States of America, the Confederacy, that had no problem being like, hey, yeah, we totally support enslaving and dehumanizing a population for the benefit, the economic benefit and gain of the rich white landowners. It makes no sense. And they try to it's like a small part of the Confederacy, but, you know, enslaving a massive amount of population and selective breeding and torturing and the horrible things that happened to slaves, and let's say, oh, that's just a small part. I would say it shows how much of a, I don't know, evil person you are to think that slavery isn't a big deal. Maybe the Confederacy was like, yeah, this isn't a big deal, there's so many other things we care about. It's like, well, that just shows you how little thought they gave to people that were black. It just, people to underplay slavery is like, just boggles my mind, you know? Just wanted to add another thing. People are up in arms about the monuments. They're being removed. They're not being destroyed. The city keeps saying that they're taking them and storing them until they figure out what to do with them. I think since New Orleans had such a different approach to slavery and the Civil War in a way, we should have some type of, maybe a French Quarter building. Someone could donate, you know, an area of the French Quarter that they have a building they're not using. That could be a small Civil War museum, or maybe the city could take some land that they have, like in City Park, and make that like a Civil War park, so to speak. And they could put the monuments there, and they could have other monuments there. Maybe make a trade with some Northern Civil War museums. Like, hey, we'll give you Jefferson Davis if you give us a, you know, Grant one, and we could have like a, you know, both there. the North and the South represented at this park, and we can have plaques and things talking about the history, and people can talk about it and have a place to go to discuss the Civil War, instead of having these monuments all scattered out throughout the city as a representation of the city. I think we should have other things. We have Andrew Jackson, which I don't like Andrew Jackson, but he was pivotal in saving the city of New Orleans. But what about the pirate Jean Lafitte? He's a pirate, ain't that great of a guy. Neither was Andrew Jackson, but Lafitte helps. Why not put that where Lee's Circle is? We can Lafitte Circle. Or why don't we have more statues of Louis Armstrong? We got Louis Armstrong Park. Or the many other people who have come from New Orleans. Anyway, that's all I got for this vlog. No dancing.